muscle tissue. So there's three types of muscle tissue. Skeletal, obviously skeletal is the one that we're all familiar with as being regular muscle. Skeletal muscle tissue is what's connecting, it's going to be using tendons to connect to bone, but it's the one that we're actually going to be using for locomotion. So it contracts, so it moves our limbs and moves our body. Cardiac muscle, that's obviously going to be the heart. So that's going to be it's only in the heart. It looks different, it functions different than skeletal muscle. And then there's smooth muscle, which is everywhere else. There's loads of smooth muscle. It's like along all the blood vessels, it's along ducts, it squishes things along. If we're swallowing, say you're going to eat cereal for breakfast, but you decide you're going to hang upside down for the monkey bars while you do it, you can do it because you have smooth muscle along your esophagus that moves food along even if it goes against gravity. So that's just smooth muscle. So those are things that's going to be in just random other places of our body. I shouldn't say random, but it is not going to be for locomotion near your bones, your musculoskeletal system, and it's not the heart. Any muscle beyond that is going to be smooth muscle. So this is what they look like. Skeletal muscle, each cell is a long cylinder like a log. And so you'll have on any given muscle, say if we're looking at the biceps brachii, they are going to be oriented from the origin to the insertion. So they're going to be aligned in that direction. And as they contract, they just contract within it, excuse me, kind of like an accordion. And so it's going to be different than that, but we'll do that in unit 2, but they're going to really come in together. So that's how skeletal muscles, each one of these is like a log. We'll see these stripes, they're known as striations, and we're going to get into the business of the striations in unit 2 when we talk about muscle physiology. So skeletal muscle are long logs that are usually aligned together. Oftentimes, you may see skeletal muscle slides that will be aligned this way, like you see here. But sometimes you will see them aligned this way, well, you'll see the stump. I grew up in what's logging country, so if you're next to a log truck, you'll see a log like this. But if you're driving behind the log truck, you see it like this. So you may see histology slides that are weird circles, and they still would be skeletal muscle, even though you're more familiar with this view. But just know, again, histology is all about knowing what it really looks like and then realizing it got cut a certain way, and you're just looking at the slice. Skeletal muscle, long beams like logs. Cardiac muscle, we see that there's some similarities because they also have these striations in there. However, cardiac muscle they're shorter and stumpier. See these little junctions here. That might be the shape of one cardiac muscle. We don't see this. Here's another one. Kind of taking a few liberties with my drawings here, but they're a little more jagged, a little more. So what happens is they tend to be more branched. They're shorter and stumpier, but they're branched because they're going around to shape the shape of the heart. They have this three-dimensional structure they have to form. So they're kind of wrapping around, and their little arms are like little sections of the cells are going out to attach to other cells. So they tend to be shorter, but branched. And then smooth muscle looks a lot like dense regular connective tissue, but a smooth muscle is actually more spindle-shaped, like that. More like a UFO. Kind of these long, they're real skinny at the end, they're wider where the nucleus is. So those would be smooth muscle cells that are going to be within the wall, say of a blood vessel, or the uterus, or ducts, or anything like that. So skeletal muscle, cylindrical fibers. The other key to skeletal muscle is because the muscle, a single muscle cell goes from the entire distance of the muscle. The longest muscle in our body is the sartorius. And so it goes from the point of our hip across our thigh to the inside of our knee. That's pretty long. That's one cell is going to go. And then you have loads of cells, but one cell. So you can't have just like one little nucleus somewhere and going, all right, I'm taking care of the whole cell. So skeletal cells, because they're so long, are known as multinucleated. So within a given single cell, you'll have many nuclei along the entire distance. It's the only one that's multinucleated because it's so long. The other ones, the cardiac muscle, short and stumpy, so it just needs one nucleus. The smooth muscle cells, also pretty small, it just needs one nucleus. So they're uninucleated, or just have one nucleus. So the multinucleated is unique to skeletal muscle cells. It has striations. That's these little stripes, the dark and light bands that you see. And it's voluntary. That means it won't move unless you send an impulse that originates from the brain all the way down, and a nerve ending releases chemicals onto your muscle, and then your muscle makes a twitch and contracts. And so that is voluntary, and that you have to have a thought that initiates the contraction of skeletal muscle. Cardiac muscle, we don't have to do that for. It's not like we're telling our heart, okay, beat now, beat now, beat now. So we don't have to. So the next two will be involuntary. So cardiac muscle cells are branch cells. They're sort of shorter but branched. They will also conduct electricity. So we're going to spend some time on that in 202 when we talk about electrocardiograms and stuff. So for you guys, just know that they do conduct electricity. And the little connections between the cells we can see as these dark pink lines. They're known as gap junctions, and they actually do pass the electrical pathway through. But we're not going to look at them in that detail. I just kind of wanted to make you be aware. But they do conduct electricity, because once a heart muscle initiates a contraction through an electrical stimulus, that will then relay to the next cell and the next cell and the next cell, and it goes on. And then the details of that will be in 202, but that's the basis for why you have a specific pattern on an electrocardiogram. They are also striated, so we notice these subtle little lines. So even though the cell is going this way, we can still see these perpendicular light lines, just like we have in the skull. So that's something common between the two. They're both striated, but what's different, cardiac muscle is involuntary, where the skeletal muscle is voluntary. And then finally, the smooth muscle or elongated tapered, they tend to be short. They are smooth, that they're not striated. So that's why they actually have their name as smooth. There are no striations, because the lines, the components deep inside are structured in a different way than the other two are. And they are also involuntary. So we have involuntary for both cardiac and smooth muscles. So it's just happening on its own, and they don't need a specific nerve from the brain to tell it to go. In fact, the cardiac muscle, it does have nerves going to the heart, but we can take somebody's heart out and let it sit here on the table, and it will beat for the duration of our class. And I could have it beating for you till next week's class as well, if I decided to put it in some saline solution, throw a little glucose in it, go steal the bubbler of oxygen from the fish tank, throw it in there, off we go. And cannulate it to the coronary arteries, and that baby will be beaten when you come back next week. So you don't have to have nerves to get the heart to beat. So this is skeletal muscle. Nice long beams. You can see several nuclei kind of mushed out to the end. They're mushed out to the sides because the muscle contains so much of the contractile elements that it doesn't have room. The nuclei are almost an afterthought to the side. But the nuclei are there to keep the cell repaired, because we're always having to do maintenance on our cells. This one's obviously a big picture of the cardiac cell, bigger than I had there. This is showing you the gap junctions. It's also between the cells of cardiac muscles. You can see each one has just one nucleus. They're striated, so they have those subtle lines that are perpendicular. And then smooth muscle. Smooth muscle, we can see the nuclei here, and we can see these cell shapes. I'm drawing it terrible, but they're, it's harder to see where they blend together so much better, but smooth muscle is pretty uniform looking, and they're multinucleated. This is an example of me showing you the cells. This is actually smooth muscle, but the same story as our skeletal. We have the side to side on the upper portion of the slide, and then we have the end of the log truck view from the bottom. This is actually taken from the wall of the intestines. So in 202, you're going to learn that the outside wall of the intestines, which is propelling food along, is we have, as the intestines like a big tube, we have the circular muscle that's going to go around and squish it and like move food forward. Like if you're the kind of person that likes to squeeze your toothpaste from the middle and you squeeze it and toothpaste comes out, that's what circular muscle does. Longitudinal muscle that's perpendicular is going to scrunch it. So you kind of scrunch and squeeze. That's how food gets moved along our GI tract. But so this is a picture of showing you the same thing, smooth muscle, either from the cut end or from the longitudinal sides. Is I want you to be able to discern between the three types of muscle tissue. You should be able to answer questions, which one's voluntary, which ones are involuntary, which ones are striated, which ones can conduct electricity. Where would you find, what type of muscle would be around blood vessels? What type of Would you find encased in tendons attached to bones? Those kind of things. So muscles pretty straightforward. They're not too complicated. And we're going to go into the meat and potatoes of muscles in Unit 2, as well as the business of the nerves in Unit 2 as well. So that's why I don't really have you do a lot with nerves and muscles here in the tissue section, because you have, God knows you have plenty to worry about for the tissues. Nervous tissue, so remember we're back to the 4 main tissue types. Remember we did epithelial tissue, connective tissue, we just did muscle tissue, easy, and the nervous tissue is going to be easier right now, the last thing. And the nervous tissue is known as tissue that can respond to also electrical impulses. Not all nervous tissue can. Some nervous tissue is just support staff and doesn't actually do the electrical conduction, but they're still going to be considered some nervous tissue. So they're going to respond to stimuli. They're going to be unique to being found in the brain and spinal cord, as well as peripheral nerves. We have some nervous tissue throughout the heart. They tend to be more specialized muscular tissue that's a combination, but we're gonna maybe not go in there so much. Here, I want you to think of nervous tissue as the main one being the neuron. That's the nerve conducting electricity. Then you have these other guys, which are just support staff. They're very, very important, but they have really specific roles that they're not themselves conducting electricity, but they're still in the nervous tissue family. And so the details, knowing these oligodendrites, microglia, you don't have to know those names. They're just here to give you a sense of what are some of the other cells. We're really going to spend time on the neuron, but again, mostly in Unit 2. So these here are just in the category of nervous tissue. So there might be some general questions at this point. Nervous tissue is one of the 4 main tissue types. It's also the tissue that conducts electricity, or what type of tissue would be found in the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord. Nervous tissue. So questions at this level for this chapter you would get just at that. The details as far as cell body and dendrites and all that, that's going to be on your test for Unit 2. So I have them listed here, but we're not going to look at them close enough. So really, if you spot a slide like this, this is a neuron. We will learn that here's a cell body, we have dendrites, and we have a single axon that comes off. But those details, we will know those in Unit 2. At this point, all I need you to know is see the slide. Looks like nervous tissue. It's nervous tissue, and that's your answer. Where would it be found? Brain and spinal cord. Done. So it's pretty basic as far as the level, and then we'll get into the other. And I also wanted to show all these little dots around. Some of them are electrical, but some of them are the neuroglia. So notice we have the neurons that are actually conducting electricity. Those are the bigger ones. But then we have lots of other neuroglial cells that are going on in the brain and spinal cord. Pretty sure. Here's another single neuron with several other neuroglia around it. Do we know the 3 types of muscle tissue? Skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. You should know the features and functions of each one, and then just a visual example of nervous tissue and know that it's in the brain and spinal cord. So that one's pretty easy. So I made a worksheet kind of thing. You don't have to do it. It's not a lab. It says lab on it, but it's just something that I put together that after class, that I thought would have been more useful. So we're doing the quiz. Name this tissue type. And to be more specific, that really totally gives it away. There you go. Okay. Name this tissue type. Okay. Then we've got this one starting from this level to here. So between here and here. Don't worry about that down there. Most of these are written on the board, so just remember on your real test, they won't be written on the board. So try to come up with it on your own without looking at the board, but then if it's not like appearing in your brain right away, then maybe make a star by it, saying, okay, it's one I need to be more comfortable with, and then you can search for it on the board. And if you still can't find it, it's not jogging, then you need to put it like double star it, like, okay, I definitely need to work on this one. So this one, where I want you to notice is the tissue type of these cells that are along here, the edges. They're really flat and squished and very thin. Okay, name this tissue type.
Can we have the same answer twice?
I like to show sometimes different views of similar things. Here's another one, this one. This one. This. So we're looking. That gives you a hint. This is one that similar to one that you did see today. Okay. This one I think is the same one you saw also earlier in this one. Okay, then we have this one. This one's just a really pretty picture. So we're looking at this layer. And we got this. And this one, so this is not muscle. It's a connective tissue. Be in these kind of patches. Okay, this one. And the hallmark of this one is always going to be the dark fibers. You're going to see these black squiggly lines. They'll always have those. Some of the ones will vary in color, but you'll see this one pretty consistently. As the black squiggly lines, that's the actual connective tissue. And these dots are actually just the cells or part of our immune system cells in this area. We have this one. We have this one. Okay. Then there's this. You forgot already? There's another one with the black fibers. We should be getting about done. Look at the last one. Okay. There's another one. So this one, which of the 4 main tissue types does this belong? And I don't know, you might not know this. This is blood. So this is a picture of like white blood cell, 2 white blood cells. And so it's of the, so blood falls in the category of one of the 4 main tissue types. So just, this is bone. These circular bone in general belongs to which of the 4 tissue types? So name this tissue type. tissue type. It's the same tissue. I'm just showing you the side, and then this would be it coming out the screen at you where it was cut. So you might prefer to look at this side. And so in this case, the nuclei are a little bit bigger than another tissue type that it looks like, but this one. And then this is another example. We can see the cell kind of does that kind of thing. Sorry, my finger's not as, those are the different cells, but you don't see them, they're really blended together. So it's not an epithelial tissue, so I'm not saying it's stacked up. I'm just kind of showing them as they're different shaped. Okay, this one. And that was it. Okay, so we're going to run to the beginning and we'll go over them. So how did you feel about it? Good. Good. Well, the end was the new stuff, so okay. Did you feel like, oh my goodness, I can't, none of them, like it was just horrible? Or, all right, I see them, but I can still need work. Or I got it, that was so easy. I got this nailed down. Okay, got a lot of mediums. Okay, anybody that's like medium or down, come see me. Or if you want to, the mediums, if you know what you gotta do, then do what you gotta do, but come see me. So we're gonna go through the answers, but just to go through our schedule, I want you to spend this weekend really nailing this down, do the body organization and all that terminology so it doesn't get too far away from you. So you've got that, you know, the cavities and the serous membranes, homeostasis, all of that. Because on Monday, we're gonna start with skin. And so we'll be doing the skin lecture and the layers, the epidermis and the dermis and all the stuff that's inside there. We're gonna kind of recap the glands again that we did with epithelial tissue. So they're gonna appear, we're gonna see them in more of their context, of functional context in the skin. Then on Wednesday, we will be doing bone physiology, how bones grow, what bones are made out of, the hard part as well as the flexible part of bones. So bone's a little more complicated than I think people realize and often don't put enough time into it. So I think bone is an area on the exam that I see more people kind of get wrong. So we'll want to make sure our thinking caps are on that day. That's Wednesday. I feel like this weekend is your like putting this sort of first two parts to bed because we have some big ones coming up that you don't want to then have to overwhelm yourself next weekend. All right, what was this one? Simple cuboidal. Where is it found? Yep, so it'll be glands, kidneys, perfect. And its job is to pump, more pumping, secretion kind of things. This, simple, and it's found where? Intestines, and it's for absorption and protection. Absorption because it's one cell layer thick, but protection because it's kind of a big cell. This one, stratified squamous epithelial tissue, perfect. Where is that found? Epidermis. Epis was the surface of the skin, epidermis, lining your esophagus, vagina. Now these little thin, flat ones around the edge, this happens to be within a kidney, but it's the glomerulus of the kidney that's doing the, after it filters the blood, it's bringing this in, it's a capsule. So what kind of tissue is here? It's going to be simple squamous, exactly, yes. This one is simple cuboidal. And most of these I had two. I had two because I wanted to see two different, I didn't want to get stuck on just one image. So I just wanted to see kind of a slightly different version. This one is simple columnar, exactly. This one is, yes, exactly. Pseudostratified, where is this located? Yes, so you think of the airway. So the airway part, because the respiratory tract ends in the alveoli, and the alveoli would be the simple squamous. So all along until you get to there, this is going to be where mucus comes out and the cilia can help bring debris out until we get to the gas exchanging part. So this here would be the end, is where the airways are. So this tissue is here. Yeah, simple squamous epithelial tissue. This is, excellent. This is pseudostratified. This is areolar. What's areolar used for? packing material, holding organs in place. That's right. It's not really strong like a tendon, but it's like really meant to hold things in place, keep them stabilized. This, adipose. And so the adipose, it does look like an airway, but it's got big open cells, and the nuclei are shoved off to the side because the cell's job is just to fill with fat. So it just kind of shoves the nuclei. So they kind of look like sideways eyeballs to me. This is dense irregular connective tissue. This is found in the dermis of the skin. So we're doing skin on Monday. So specifically, just put that in your notes. It's dermis of the skin. This is, it's kind of wavy. If it was in real life, in a body, it would be pulled more taut. So you kind of see my, excellent. Dense, regular connective tissue. This would be like a tendon or ligament. This is another view of adipose, yep, of fat. This is reticular, loose reticular connective tissue. The black lines are pretty characteristic, and it's going to be found in the spleen. This is another view of, yes. This is another hyaline cartilage. It's got the frog eye looking cells, and then the glassy, smooth tissue around it. This is dense, irregular, excellent. This is another view of, excellent, hyaline cartilage. This is fibrocartilage. It withstands force and compression. That's why we needed extra fibers in this. So we still have the frog eye cells. This is found in the intervertebral discs as well as the menisci of the knee. Excellent. And this is another view of reticular connective tissue from the spleen. This is another view of dense regular connective tissue, tendons and ligaments. This is another view of the fibrocartilage. You got the frog eyes, you have the wavy. And then this is blood, and blood is part of connective tissue. So it's in that family because it's got cells and fibers. Well, it's not really floating the fibers, it's got fibrin which can make fibers. So it's sort of loosely associated with connective tissue, and bone is also connective tissue. This is what type of muscle? So we have three types. Skeletal muscle. This is smooth muscle. Where's smooth muscle found?
Everywhere else, but aside from the heart
and just musculoskeletal, like it's not a locomotive muscle. It's, so you can say intestines, moves food along, ducts, moves juices along, uterus, pushes the baby out, you know, so that's where, and it's autonomic. What's this one? Cardiac muscle. Is it autonomic or sort of involuntary or voluntary? Involuntary. And how many nuclei does it have? One per cell or more than one? Just one per cell, yes. What's this one? Another picture of, it's supposed to be smooth muscle, so it's not as, it's just another example of smooth muscle, involuntary, and has one single nucleus. What about this one? Skeletal muscle, how many nuclei? Multiple, yeah. So there's no set number. And what's this one? Another cardiac, and that's it.